Would you please stand? Let us honor you. Thank you for serving, each and every one of you. We owe them a tremendous debt, don't we? Thank you for serving. And we remember those who aren't here this morning because they were willing to pay the ultimate, give the ultimate sacrifice. I don't have a really good segue from that to what I'm going to share this morning. But how many of you obviously you're not traveling this morning because you're here, but oftentimes Memorial Day weekend people start traveling, right? I don't know. What do you like to do when you go on a trip or on a vacation? Some people are going to say, well, I like to go to Disneyland, or I like to go to the lake, I like to go to the beach, or whatever. When I vacation, and Brenda loves to do this too, I love to get on the motorcycle, all right, and just go on a trip. So last October, I went on a road trip down south. I went through Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee and a little part of West Virginia, and then also all the way down maybe in a little bit of North Carolina. Now, any trip through the state of Ohio has to include a few things. And one of them is, you got to be with me here, Skyline Chili, all right? Got to include Skyline Chili, right? And another one of the places where, if you've never been there, you got to put this on your bucket list, is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum. How many of you ever been there, Wright-Pat? All right, many of us have. It is just an awesome place to go. I could go there and spend days. And by the way, it's free. Dayton, Ohio, okay? Like the birthplace of aviation, Dayton, Ohio. And Wright-Pat. Now, the reason why I stopped by there last October is late last summer, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base unveiled what they've spent the 50,000 man-hours restoring. And it was the Memphis Belle. How many of you saw the movie Memphis Belle? And Memphis Belle is a B-17 that flew 25 missions in World War II, the first to complete 25 missions. And they were daylight bombing, and it was very rare for a bomber to be able to complete 25 missions. I think nearly 250,000 men lost their lives just over Europe alone. So anyway, the Memphis Belle was restored, 50,000 man-hours, and it's on display at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum. And as we think about the sacrifices of so many, I think it's fitting. This just is a God thing. That's part of my message today. But I just had to go, and I had to see the Memphis Belle after lunch at Skyline Chili, of course. Now, after I did that, I headed down to Johnson University. It used to be Johnson Bible College, just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. And we have some students that go there. Nathan Bloomfield, he's the son of Tom and Sally Bloomfield, graduated just a couple of weeks ago. And so I got to see him and eat dinner with them, and also Carissa Parrott, Sherry's daughter, and her fiance now. Of course, at that time it wasn't. It was intended, yes, Connor. And so we got to eat, and I got to feel kind of young again and be on campus, and it was just really cool. If you've never been to Johnson, you need to put that one on your bucket list too, because I tell you, it's just beautiful. Down there in those mountains and the Smokies. And boy, if I had visited Johnson, don't tell Jacob Ray, he's gone this weekend, but if I had visited Johnson before I decided where I was going to go to Bible college, I might have just ended up at Johnson. My Uncle Larry and my dad actually even went to Johnson years and years ago. Anyway, I visited Johnson, and I also did something else which you got to do if you're in the neighborhood. But I visited a stretch of highway which is called the Tail of the Dragon, and it starts like in Tennessee, on the edge of Tennessee, and it goes over to North Carolina, Deals Gap. Go ahead and run the video. to ride the tail of the dragon, and no, I didn't wipe out. I'm here today. Although I did see a motorcycle wipe out when I was riding on that. But then in this trip, and this is, I am getting to where, what we're going to talk about this morning. On this trip, I did something which I had never done before, and I am so glad I did, because I learned something that I had never heard before. And I would guess if you've been a Christian a long time, as I have, and you know anything about the church, you've probably heard of where I'm headed this morning. But I guarantee you've never heard what I'm going to share. And I would imagine that if you were in any church in America today, you would never hear what I'm going to share with you. I'd never heard it before. I've taken tests on this stuff. I've had to write papers on this stuff, and I had never heard before what I'm going to share with you this morning about how important Better Together is. On this trip, I went to a place called Cane Ridge. I visited the Cane Ridge meeting house. And you know what? I'm going to play a little bit of a video which I recorded at Cane Ridge, just to set the tone for what I'm going to share with you in a moment. Go ahead.
Hi, Compass. This is Dave.
Wow,
and
I've lost weight.
Today I'm
October.
well, I'm not really in, but I'm on the outskirts of Paris. That's Paris, Kentucky. And if you know anything about Paris, Kentucky, you know that it is outside of Paris, Kentucky. Well, that's where our roots are. I'm standing right outside of maybe if I turn around here, that'll help. I'm standing right outside of a church building that was built around an old church building, which is Cane Ridge, the Cane Ridge Meeting House. And if I turn around again, don't get dizzy, you can see behind me, there you go, the tombstone of a fellow named Barton W. Stone.
It was taller
and he was a young preacher, and preaching in this area of Kentucky, which is about 30 miles east of Lexington. And he was preaching down here, and they had a crusade, and they had upwards of between 20 and 30,000 people here for a week in this area. And they preached, where the Bible speaks, we speak, and where the Bible's silent, we're silent. They preached about unity, and out of this Cane Ridge revival began the Christian church. They said, why don't we get back to just being Christians only? And it was right here at Cane Ridge where it all began. This is our birthplace. This is where our roots come from. I think it's important to know where you come from, don't you?
So we're a Christian church because back there in Cane Ridge in like 1802, they decided to just call themselves Christians only. Let's look at the next video, the next slide here. And that, as I said, that stone structure was built in the 1950s over this log cabin structure, which was the old Cane Ridge meeting house. And so this log cabin structure was where really the Christian church began about 230 years ago. Next slide. With the Cane Ridge, and there's Barton W. Stone. So I got to go into this place, and it just so happened that I was the only one there. I was the only one there. It was midweek in October. They were getting ready to shut down for the season, and so I was the only person at Cane Ridge that day. And so the curator let me walk up and stand at the pulpit that Barton W. Stone preached from. And as I stood at that balcony and I was asking the curator questions, I stood there for an hour and we talked about some of the things I'm going to share with you this morning. But it was just such a powerful moment, and I guess you just have to, I don't know if maybe you just have to be a preacher or what, but it was just an awesome moment for me, one of those bucket list kind of things. And next slide. as I stood there, this was my view of the inside of the Cane Ridge Meeting House. And go ahead and play that video. Is it playing? Oh, yeah, it did. Oh, good. All right. So anyway, as I stood there, the curator said, now, back in 1801, when the Cane Ridge revival took place, the stairway that you see in the picture there was not there. It was not there. And as I'm standing there, the bells weren't going off yet in my mind, but he said, well, there was no stairway there. And then let's go to the next picture. And I had seen an old picture of the Cane Ridge Meeting House from the outside of it. And I don't know if you can see it, but on the left side, which would be the west side of the building, what do you see there? You see a ladder up to a window. And I said, so finally it dawned on me, I asked the curator, so if there was no stairway, then how did people get up to the balcony? And he said, well, there was a ladder on the outside of the building that went up through a window. And still the bell hadn't gone off in my mind. And I said, isn't that really strange that there would be no stairway up to the balcony? Not on the inside, not on the outside, that it would just be a ladder through the window? And it still hadn't dawned on me. So I said, why was it that they just had a ladder? And the curator kind of fidgeted a little bit, and finally he said, the balcony was for the slaves. The balcony was for the slaves. And then it hit me where I was and the time period that I was in. It was 1800 and it was in Kentucky, a southern slave-owning state. And the balcony was for the segregation of the slaves. And I just said, wow, I have never heard this before. I've studied Restoration Movement history and I've taken tests on it, but I had never heard that the Cane Ridge Church was a segregated church. The first Christian church in America was a segregated church. Segregation, by the way, is not new. Segregation can take many forms. It can be ethnic, it could be economic, it could be gender-based, it could even be generational. And it could take place all in the church. The Apostle Paul spent a lot of time talking about breaking down the walls that divide us. I mean, a couple examples. Colossians 3 and verse 11, where the Apostle Paul says, here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all.